In Western culture, we treat human sexuality as a biological force, an unchanging transhistorical drive that predates society and shapes our institutions. This assumption is what anthropologist Gail Rubin calls sexual essentialism. It operates as a smokescreen, obscuring the mechanisms of power that actually dictate how we live and who gets punished. Sexuality is a human product, constructed and managed exactly like systems of labor, diet, or transportation. Rubin describes her position as a Kantianism without a transcendental libido. The body, the brain, and our genitalia provide the necessary prerequisites, but culture dictates the form, the experiences, and the meanings we assign to them. To understand this, we have to look at the realm of sexuality as a distinct political domain. We have to map its internal politics, its inequities, and its specific modes of oppression. Until we stop treating these arrangements as forces of nature, we lack the tools to analyze them as political systems. The philosopher Michel Foucault pointed out a major discontinuity in how the West manages desire. Pre-industrial societies punished forbidden acts, like sodomy, but they did not view the perpetrators as a specific type of human. That changed during the 19th century. Industrialization and urbanization drove rural populations into cities, allowing individuals with similar desires to congregate in isolated urban pockets. In response, the state, the medical establishment, and psychiatry began documenting and naming these urban congregations. This initiated a process of erotic speciation. They stopped looking at isolated actions and started naming distinct species of people: the homosexual, the pervert, the sex offender. Once you categorize populations into separate erotic species, society requires an apparatus to manage, police, and rank them. The invention of these erotic identities provided the structure for modern sexual stratification. This diagram is Gail Rubin's map of that stratification. It is a hierarchical evaluation of sex acts, organized into an inner, charmed circle and a vast set of outer limits. At the center, we find the behaviors society considers good, normal, and natural. To occupy this space, sexuality must be strictly heterosexual, marital, monogamous, reproductive, and non-commercial. Outside that boundary, we find the bad, abnormal, and unnatural sex. This void contains homosexual acts, promiscuity, commercial sex work, solitary sex, and cross-generational encounters. Placement on this map dictates your lived reality. Those inside the inner circle are rewarded with certified mental health, respectability, physical mobility, and institutional support. Those relegated to the outer limits are subjected to a presumption of mental illness, criminality, loss of employment, and severe economic sanctions. This system is enforced through the fallacy of misplaced scale. Small differences in erotic taste, which in other contexts might be treated like a preference in cuisine, are burdened with an excess of significance, triggering draconian legal and social punishments. The system rationalizes the well-being of the sexually privileged while enforcing the adversity of the marginalized, providing a moral justification for the unequal distribution of rights and resources. This updated chart shows the intense friction at the boundary. The glowing border separating the inner and outer circles acts as a demilitarized zone. This border is maintained by a domino theory of sexual peril. There is a cultural terror that if the boundary is breached by even one unacceptable act, the barrier will crumble and sexual chaos will destroy civilization. Over time, the boundary is heavily contested. We see specific practices, like unmarried couples living together, slowly negotiate their way across the border toward respectability. Meanwhile, behaviors firmly on the bad side of the line are stripped of all moral complexity. They are pushed back into the outer limits and viewed only as unmodulated horrors, incapable of involving affection or free choice. This rigid ideological boundary transforms private desires into public battlegrounds, requiring relentless state intervention to maintain order. When social stress is high, the state weaponizes this boundary through the moral panic. This is the political moment of sex, where diffuse, unrelated societal anxieties are displaced onto marginalized erotic populations. These targeted groups are cast as folk devils. The media stokes public hysteria, creating an atmosphere that justifies the expansion of state power and the creation of punitive vice laws. During the post-war era of the 1950s, anxieties about national security merged with sexual terror. Congress and the FBI launched systematic purges, and a wave of sex offender laws gave the psychological professions intense police power. To fuel this hysteria, bureaucratic and popular discourse deliberately blurred the lines between consensual acts, like sodomy, and violent sexual assaults. In the late 1970s, a similar backlash emerged. Driven by figures like Anita Bryant and her Save Our Children campaign, a sudden panic over child pornography swept the nation, resulting in sweeping bills that rolled back First Amendment rights. These panics result in direct state intervention. Targeted communities face systematic surveillance, police raids, and legislative attacks that strip individuals of their livelihoods and their freedoms. The response to the AIDS crisis followed this exact mechanism. Political and religious factions rapidly weaponized homophobia and fear of the disease to justify calls for quarantine, the shuttering of community institutions, and employment bans. Moral panics never solve the actual societal problems they claim to address. Their only function is to fortify the charmed circle by destroying the lives of those outside it. When attempting to fight this hierarchy, progressives often rely entirely on feminist theory for guidance. Gender oppression and sexual oppression overlap in significant ways, but they operate via analytically distinct mechanics. This is complicated by a linguistic trap in the English language. The word sex conflates gender identity, being female or male, with sexual desire, acts, and arousal. Feminist conceptual tools detect gender-based hierarchies, but they often miss the power relations specific to erotic desire. Just as early attempts to map all gender inequality using only Marxist theory failed, feminism cannot serve as the residual, catch-all theory for the entirety of human sexuality. We require a new, autonomous conceptual framework, a radical theory of sex, built specifically to dissect erotic power dynamics. This framework must embrace a concept of benign sexual variation. We must recognize erotic diversity as a neutral biological and social fact, rather than a threat to civilization. We must reject the mechanics of the moral panic, discard erotic demonology, and demand the repeal of all vice laws that punish consensual behavior. To achieve true social justice, we must recognize erotic life as a highly contested political domain and permanently dismantle the charmed circle.